What's up, guys? It's me, Krashy here, and I'm going to be doing a new updated Infinite Crisis jungle tier list. I was hanging out in Picasso's stream, and a guy came in and basically asked, what the tier list for jungle is, and I thought about it, and I remember the last two videos that I did, or the last two tier lists that I did. I wasn't really pleased with the formatting, so I redid the formatting. If you go back and look at this image versus that one, you're going to see that I basically did like a traditional tier list. I broke it into 5 different tiers. We have S tier, which stands for God tier, or best tier, basically, and then obviously following in line A through D. So let's get into it. My S tier pick, currently the only one that I have in there is Gas Cat. And the reason I picked Gas Cat is she just is like an all-inclusive champion. I think she doesn't really start to fall off until late game, but early game her clear is amazingly fast. Her level 6 potential to get kills and ganks is really, really high, and ultimately she's just the only really solid stealth champion in the game right now. So I think that, I don't know, she's just the only, like, I had a little bit of a problem, like, putting only her up here, but really, in my opinion, she's the only jungler currently, in my eyes, that sticks out a little bit more than the others, so that's where I've landed her. In my A tier, I have 3 champions. I have Atomic Wonder Woman, Superman, and Agiel. Agiel getting bumped up in my list. His only issue was his mana management. And they did actually do a bit of a, what's it called? A bit of a buff for him will consumption wise, to where he's actually able to kind of roam around. He's a very effective bruiser and tank. He's also a really good source of power damage coming out of the jungle, which you don't see as often. There's more or less the majority of junglers are going to be AD. So he's a really, really strong pick right now. Definitely an A tier champion, arguably an S tier as well, because I definitely think he's one of the better junglers in the game. Superman as well, with the buff to Superman, I think he's an amazing jungler. His ultimate for engages, it's also gonna keep you from having to use a teleport to get across the map very fast. Really, really good for locking down somebody very quickly. And pretty much the same for Atomic Wonder Woman as well. She's just more on the burst side of things than being, bruiserish. So she actually has a really strong place in the game. I think she falls off a little bit more than Superman later on, though. So, but again, she's a very strong assassin. I definitely think that she deserves a spot up there. So in B tier, I have Nightmare Batman, Doomsday, and Shazam. Now, my Doomsday is always going to be a little bit higher than I think the rest of people will probably put him, and that's just because I think he's an amazing AD tank bruiser, and the reason I say that is because he has the capability of going amazingly tanky while still putting out a lot of damage due to his control. The problem with Doomsday is that if he doesn't have setup on his team, he's never going to be very effective. So you can't really use him as the primary initiator, which means that if you're going too tanky on him, basically you just have to have some kind of CC setup or some kind of hard engage. For example, a really good initiate or really good setup for him is going to be API, or another really good setup in a different role is going to be Star Sapphire. She can kind of throw out her ult, he can kind of get in and actually reach some of those carries that he needs to get to, so really strong. Shazam, I definitely think Shazam's still really high up as well. The problem with Shazam now is that the ability to do a lot of damage on Shazam comes at the cost of not being very tanky. Now that we see Superman and Agiel kind of stepping up into the jungle role, it's making him a little bit less viable because he's kind of doing what they're doing, only at the expense of not being very tanky. Now, obviously, he has his passive, and that helps out with that a little bit, but you don't really get a lot of armor on Shazam. So Shazam's still an amazing initiator. I definitely think he can fill a role very well, especially if you do get another kind of like an off tank or a tank to go along with him. But definitely just not the best in my eyes. Nightmare Batman, again, Nightmare Batman's in a weird spot. I definitely think he's still efficient enough to be in the top 3 tiers. I personally just don't enjoy playing him. I think he's a very odd champion until we get some changes to him, like whenever he switches over to Bruiser. His W is virtually useless, his slow is okay, and I think he's just a niche pick for the ultimate. Later on, he doesn't even team fight very well, so I don't know. Shazam, or Nightmare Batman, just in a little bit of a weird spot, so, but still very effective. Now, I have my C tier. My C tier is huge. My C tier, I'm going to very briefly go over, because you can see the first 4 picks are mainly tanks, and now that's with the addition of Arcane Green Lantern. Tank jungling, it's just very slow, and the way this game works in the jungle, where you actually have to make a presence and show up to get the EMPs, you never really want to be falling behind, or you don't really ever want to be, in my opinion, someone who's going to take longer than somebody else, and I don't know, you just want to have that early pressure. You want to be able to make your presence around the map And so for the tanks, I honestly think that they all fit around the same tier. I mean, obviously, I think Wonder Woman would probably be a better jungler than Atrocitus, but I think in terms of the tier list, especially a tier list is split as, you know, 5 different tiers, all the tanks kind of fit on the same row. Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle I have on my list because I actually think he's a very strong sleeper pick. He is classified under marksman, I believe, or marksman assassin, but he's an amazingly strong character in terms of just having a double kit and having that ultimate to be utilized in a way that no other champion in the game currently can, where you could kind of just change stances and really do a lot of burst damage getting in. So I definitely think he has a place in jungle tier. I don't think you'll see a lot of him played in competitive or, you know, even high up, so I definitely don't think his tier is very high. But still very effective jungler. I would rather jungle Blue Beetle over, say, a Robin or, say, a Fat Joker. So for some of those champions that you don't see on my list, he's got good initiation, he's got decent CC, something that I really don't feel like Robin or Fat Joker have, or at least very reliable anyways, so that's why you'll see him on my list. Supergirl, I think Supergirl is basically like a version of Doomsday to me. She's kind of like, she's like that saying that I can't remember. It's the she's a master of none, whatever the saying is. She doesn't really do anything that great. She doesn't really do that much damage as a bruiser. She doesn't really have that much control because her ultimate's just knockback, and she has that small knockdown. Her movement speed increase is pretty nice, and I think she could be used really effectively with the right team comp, but I just ultimately don't think she does all that much. I mean, for example, take Superman, who I honestly think does more damage and has better abilities. He's got a global ultimate, so all in all for me, she's decent as a jungler. I definitely think she deserves a spot on the list, but she's arguably a C or D tier jungler right now, so I think with a little bit of small changes to Supergirl, maybe even just a little bit of a buff damage-wise, she could be very viable. And my very last tier, D tier, nothing too special, Batman Prime and Flash. Both people that I just think, I mean, you can take in jungle. Flash, I definitely think you can take in jungle, but with the nerfs to him, it kind of hit him really hard. Everybody else especially going up around him, and then him not being able to dash as often. And for me, I didn't think Flash was very great in lane to begin with, so I think it just makes more sense to kind of put him in the jungle, but he's not doing it that well. He's actually not seen very often. So Flash, D tier jungle, and Batman Prime, again, kind of the same issue. Until we see some changes for Batman Prime and Nightmare Batman, they're in a weird spot because he plays a lot more like an assassin, and he just doesn't have the CC, but he doesn't really have the burst because his ultimate doesn't really you can't really utilize your ultimate in a gank to do a whole lot of damage. So I think ultimately Batman Prime we will see jump up the tier list in a little while once we get some changes to him, and we'll see where Nightmare Batman ends up. So I don't know, guys, that's my tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you learned a little bit. If you have any questions about some of the champions maybe that I didn't put on there, or if you want to ask a little bit more in depth about why I put a certain champion somewhere, leave it in the comments below, either on Reddit or on just here on YouTube. So I don't know, enjoy it, take it easy, peace.